It's double feature week here at Cinema 100, and this week we're diving into two powerhouse films from 1932. I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang and A Farewell to Arms. At first glance, they might seem like completely different stories. One, a scathing indictment of the American justice system, while the other, a tragic romance set against the backdrop of World War I. But look closer, and you'll see both films explore the same core themes: the brutality of institutions, the struggle for freedom, and the way fate seems to crush even the strongest of spirits. With Paul Muni delivering one of the most harrowing performances of the early 30s, and Gary Cooper and Helen Hayes bringing Hemingway's doomed love story to life. These films remind us that whether it's the horrors of war or the chains of injustice, some battles are impossible to escape. So let's dig in and dive in to both of these movies. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang and A Farewell to Arms.
What sort of a town is this? Any girls?
Many beautiful English nurses. The most beautiful is Miss Barkley.
How do you do?
How do you do? You're a grand girl.
I'm a crazy girl
Why?
to stay out here.
Miss Barkley prefers you to me.
You like her?
No.
I wish he could do something really sinful. Everything we do seems so innocent and right. You'll never get married.
We will.
No, you won't. You'll fight before you'll marry.
Oh, we never fight.
You've time yet.
We won't fight ever.
You'll die then. Fight or die. That's what people do.
Here he is, the man who preferred death to the tortures of the chain gang. His was the most sensational escape in chain gang history. Crawling through the thick brush, bloodhounds at his heels, hiding in swamps, he outwitted his pursuers at every turn. This man has lived 1,000 lives in one. A hunted thing on earth.
Ding, ding, ding. It's that time again. Battle of the A-list celebrities. Man of 1,000 faces, a.k.a. Paul Muni, and the strong, silent type, Gary Cooper. 5'10" Paul Muni stands as 6'3" Gary Cooper, as a man that has big stature over him, but not necessarily better screen presence.
Sure.
Will, we watched two very different movies, even though they kind of had a loose connection of World War I with both of them. We watched I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, release date November 10th, 1932. Tagline: World War I veteran and aspiring engineer tries to re-enter civilian life after being unwillingly caught up in a robbery. He suffers the intolerable conditions of a southern chain gang, struggling to clear his name and prove his worth. Distributed by Warner Brothers, directed by Mervyn LeRoy. Runtime of 1 hour and 32 minutes. We've already talked about this, Will, starring Paul Muni as James Allen and Glenda Farrell as Marie. Those kind of get 1A and I guess not really 1B, but you get the marquee names there. And then the other movie, Will, was A Farewell to Arms. Release date December 8th, 1932. Tagline: American ambulance driver and an English nurse fall in love in Italy during World War I. Directed by Frank Borage. Distributed by Paramount Pictures. Runtime of 1 hour and 22 minutes. And then finally, Will, starring Gary Cooper as Frederick Henry, Helen Hayes as Catherine Barkley, and our man Adolphe Menjau as Captain Rinaldi. Will, fair to say these are two very different movies. Give me your initial reaction just on where we stand with both these movies, your initial reactions, maybe fill in the blanks. If you want to do them separately, we can do that too, but just where do you stand? How was your time watching these movies?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Fairly different. I think it's interesting that they kind of jump off with that same, I don't want to say anti-war mentality, but definitely like an the man mentality, right? Because in one instance, in A Farewell to Arms, we have the, he's in the war but doesn't want to be anymore. And then we have Paul Muni coming back from the war, and we're kind of seeing how it's treating him. So kind of two different perspectives on a common theme, but both, I thought, really good movies. Really good movies, actually. So, you said fill in the blank word. So Fugitive from a Chain Gang, I kind of ambitious and idealistic. is kind of how I was thinking about this movie by the end. I think it wanted to say a lot, and I think it had very strong opinions about society, especially, it's out in the South, in Tennessee, Kentucky area. And I thought that it was maybe a little over its skis in a couple moments, didn't really give us enough to get the full theme, driven home, but idealistic, I think, is a good word there. And then with A Farewell to Arms, I really was thinking about this as a Greek tragedy, like a Tristan and Isolde kind of theme here, where we've got these two star-crossed lovers who in the end just can't be together. And for a number of circumstances. And I thought it was the most romantic movie we've watched so far. I was really drawn to both of these, but Farewell to Arms kind of took the cake here for me.
Wow. Will, I am speechless. Like, utterly speechless. I don't think we could be further apart on this movie at all. I 100% thought that. All right. Farewell to Arms, I'll just come right out and say it. I found it to be excruciatingly brutal to watch.
Okay.
I'm really being honest. I found the performances, use the term wooden. I say flat. I found the whole movie to be contrived, maybe trite, maybe I really wasn't sure what the plot of the movie even was until 45 minutes in. I will say, I thought it got better as it went, but it took too long to get better. I am 0 for 2 with the Gary Cooper experience, which saddens me because I just thought that Gary Cooper was going to be, you just hear that he's one of the founding guys of this thing, and you look excited or get excited for these performances. I am just shocked to hear that not only did you like both of these movies, but you're giving the nod to this one. So, which is a good thing, though. Just it goes to show that I might not be right. You might be right. You might not be right. I might be right. There might not be a right or wrong. It just goes to show the different viewing experience that audience members can have. But yeah, so I'll even tell you kind of how I watched this. So I watched the first 30 minutes and I was like, and this was late last night. And I said to myself, okay, maybe I'm in a bad mood because seriously. Like I always want to come to the table with these movies, giving them like the best advantage, best foot forward that they possibly can have for me to like them. And I just couldn't get there. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stop. And then after work tonight, I'm going to come back. I'm going to watch this movie on a second day. Maybe I'm just in a bad mood. I don't know. Maybe, you know what I mean? And I found myself for the last 45 minutes to an hour checking the clock probably more times than I should admit. I just had never got there. Made me thankful we were doing a double feature because I thought we were going to agree on this and kind of be kicking a dead horse. So that's my thoughts on that one. Now, I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, Will. I really like this movie. I agree with you. There's some moments that it could have been a little bigger. We could have got more bang for our buck, but I think a lot of it just stands out to just, I think so far, we've watched 2 movies from Paul Muni now, 2 movies from Gary Cooper. And, I opened up with the nickname, the Man of 1,000 Faces. It works for me. I think Paul Muni so far is head and shoulders so far better as an actor, maybe more of an actor's actor of the things that maybe my palate is interested in. So because of that, you take his acting style, and then you take the kind of the narrative that of the I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. I thought it was different. I thought it was interesting right away. Even the kind of the conflict of the robbery, I thought was believable, and maybe not necessarily 10 years for a white man. Or maybe Paul Mooney's not a white man, but 10 years for a white man during, kind of a racist South. That part might be a little far-fetched, but if you overlook that and just kind of get into the story, I found the second one to be a breath of fresh air for my fill in the blank words. So I'm going to give you this opportunity, Will, just to tell me the things you loved about A Farewell to Arms, that maybe worked for you a little bit better than Fugitive Chain Gang, and then I'll do the opposite.
Yeah. I want to first say, like, I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang is still a great movie. I really like this movie. I think I'm a little more critical here than you because I think about I think about crime a lot. I've thought about crime in a philosophical context. I taught a course at University of Toledo around inequality, right? So like race, gender, and then class. And I focused a lot in the class section on crime and poverty, right? And I think my issue here is it doesn't feel nuanced enough, right? So I'm looking at this from like an argumentative standpoint, like, hey, if I'm playing devil's advocate and I'm sitting in that room with the lawyer who kind of comes back and argues for the chain gang, like,
Yeah.
I feel like there was a lot of back and forth there that was missed to really find that nuance. And I think because I've spent so much time on this, it hurt it a little bit more for me than maybe it did for you. But even that being said, like, that's just it's a ding. It's not necessarily like a hole, right? So for me, it's still a really, really good movie. As far as Farewell to Arms goes, like, I'm a sucker for tragedy when the ending is not happy, because I just feel like that's more realistic. And for these two people who are clearly in love, to not be able to end up together, everything's stolen from Frederick by the end of this movie. It really affected me, especially with the introduction to Richard Wagner's Tristan and Isolde is playing on that last scene. And you may or may not believe me, listener, but I actually really love that song and do listen to it from time to time. I thought there was just something very poetic about A Farewell to Arms, even though I agree Gary Cooper wasn't strong the whole way through and it felt a little flat in that first act of the film. But as it unfolds, man, when you get to that last act in A Farewell to Arms, those look like real tears. He looks like he's really hurt, and I feel like they found something together in that last scene that I think transcends time.
Man, it's so. I feel, Will, like I know you. and it's so funny to me. I was watching that movie and my experience was, I can't wait to get on this podcast and for us to share this common misery. And we just don't have it. And I am just caught off guard. Okay, let me just talk to the things in which you talked about. Sure. I personally did not. The payoff. We talk a lot about the payoff, right? So the entire movie is building up to this point between this tragedy that's happening at the end. The dialogue, the lack of dialogue, the lack of exposition throughout the entire movie, but let's get to the payoff. It didn't emotionally work for me because there's just this weird. The dialogue choices are so weird for me. She tells the doctors and the nurses that she doesn't want him to know, and yet reveals it to him herself 60 seconds later in the dialogue. And it's like, okay, and that's just one example of something that kind of happened throughout the entire movie. I thought character motivations didn't make a lot of sense. Adolphe Menja, who we really like, I felt like his character, he's jealous early on, so he sends her away, but yet he still wants to be boys. And then, which is fine. That part not necessarily is a wrongdoing, but then, he refuses to kind of send the letters. And I think he's kind of like us. He's like, there's no way you're in love with this woman. You just met her. There's no way that this thing is real. I think, and that's kind of how I felt. Man, you also said this is the most romantic duo that we've had too, or movie that we've had too. When we get to the scene by scene breakdown, we talk to that movie more in touch. We'll kind of share more of our differences there. But I just, right off the get, I'm shocked, but I'm glad that you enjoyed it, bud. I'm glad that you had a lovely movie going experience. let's talk I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang in a little bit more detail. All right.
Okay.
Anecdotes. Couple things to note. This film it sparked real change. This film was so powerful and shocking in its depiction of the inhumane conditions of the Southern chain gangs that it stirred public outrage. The public response ultimately led to significant reforms in the prison system, especially in the state of Georgia. The movie is often credited with pressuring officials to soften the harsh conditions of chain gangs, marking it as one of the earliest examples of a film directly influencing social reform. That's the power of art. That's why these things go there sometimes, right? Like you hear a lot of times athletes should just shut up and dribble, right? That's something that's been said in the past. This is why athletes don't shut up and dribble. This is why artists decide to go outside of themselves, outside of the realms of just entertainment, and kind of shine a spotlight on certain things. And it's the areas in which society kind of pushes back against, the status quo and the norms. And we are thankful and better off as a society because people are brave enough to make these types of decisions. So just where are you at with that kind of anecdote and hearing that?
I think that's great. I think knowing that art can inspire, real changes. Sometimes you get worried about the project, right? And whether or not it's, paying attention to film or, actual like art and painting and stuff like that is actually making any sort of real difference, or if it's some frivolous, higher society thing that, only the privileged have access to, which is still a concern, but knowing that it can make real change is the reason why, people keep doing it and why I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, what's crazy to think to me is like we were born in a world where there aren't chain gangs, right? Like we're talking less than 100 years ago. This is still, this is still a very, real thing that's happening in people's society, especially in late South Georgia. Isn't that weird? I mean, just to think that you tend to think that when you're born, and I was born in 1987, you tend to think that anything that happened prior to you was so long ago, right? And then, of course, we talked about slavery. We've talked about racism and how, like, it feels like slavery was so long ago. But then you think about, early 1900s and, where segregation was at. And, just this idea of 4 generations ago, people's grandmothers that are still alive can tell stories of their family members in slavery. Like it's not that long ago, these things.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you also got to be careful too. Like, capital recapitulates, man. The prison system recapitulates. So there's not chain gangs now. Right. But there's still lots of corporations that use prison labor for super cheap, like license plates, and Google even has like some of their, hardware that's made by the prison system. It's different now. It's not as bad necessarily, but they get to work in air conditioning now, but they don't really have a choice still. So yeah, definitely agree that it's good that they're not out there swinging those pickaxes anymore for free, but still some issues.
I've been working on the railroad. Paul Muni's intense preparation. The Paul Muni, the film's lead actor, was known for immersing himself in roles. For this film, he spent hours studying how to convey the physical and psychological toll of imprisonment. His performance was lauded as one of his finest and is considered one of the reasons the movie resonated so powerfully with audiences. That definitely resonates with me, his acting ability. I think he's kind of ahead of his time, to be honest with you, compared to a lot of these other guys that we've seen so far. Some of the names that we've watched thus far in films, we've seen Gary Cooper now twice. I'm trying to think of some of the other names, of course, when I need to pull, I'm not getting them. But the point being is that just from all of the 1930, 31, the movies that we've seen so far, it just feels like his performances kind of stand out, even so much so that I thought James Cagney did a great job until we saw Scarface. And then I was like, holy crap, he's even light years above him. Where are you at with the 2 performances we've seen so far from Paul Muni? And maybe do you have a favorite one over the other, or just enjoy watching great actors do their craft?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably the best all around actor we've seen. Peter Lorre, right, is in M. That
Yep.
performance in M from Peter Lorre was, pretty incredible too. So it's kind of like a 1A, 1B there. But Paul Muni, I mean, until we watch Peter Lorre again, which hopefully we get to, it's hard to say Paul Muni doesn't have like a leg up in this race. But yeah, as far as like Paul Muni versus Gary Cooper, if that's the question, I think there's a pretty clear winner here. Paul Muni is, the whole movie is just on one. So
What's interesting, because according to Chat GPT, it's not a question. Gary Cooper would be better. He's had 2 Academy Award wins for Best Actor for Sergeant York in High Noon. That's Gary Cooper we're talking about, where one win came for Paul Muni for a movie that we haven't even seen. It's called The Story of Louise Pasteur. So maybe we'll get to both those films down the road. It's just interesting how you and I perceive something in 100 years ago, and even AI in this case perceives it a different way. So finally, the last thing that I thought was
Michael Jordan.
Say that one more time.
Said AI prefers Michael Jordan.
AI should prefer Michael. Inspiring future filmmakers and writers, this movie's unflinching portrayal of prison life and corruption inspired future filmmakers, especially in the genre of prison dramas. Its influence can be seen in later films like Cool Hand Luke, and everybody knows that to be starring. Oh my God, what is going on with me today? The sauce guy, Cool Hand Luke.
Oh.
Paul Newman. Thank you. And then Shawshank Redemption, both of which explore similar themes of resilience in the face of institutional cruelty. We talked a little bit on, current modern day prison cruelty, things of that nature. I don't want to necessarily go down that road. But what I do thought was fascinating was there was a term used in one of the, I don't know if it's litigation scenes or just the back and forth between the lawyers and the representatives from the chain gang in this movie. And they talk about the spread of misinformation. And I just found that to be, wow. So it just stood out of the screen for me, Will. 100 years ago, we're still having this conversation about what the truth actually is. And I wanted them to dive in a little bit more in that scene, I think, as did you, and kind of break that down and kind of flush out the theme even more. But they didn't. They kind of stayed focused on Paul Muni's character and less about the right in your face injustice of the prison system. So, and more about him overcoming these things. So I was kind of fine with that because the whole movie did that, but I would have liked a little bit more. I just thought it was fascinating that 100 years ago, they're using literal word misinformation. Yeah.
I didn't catch the use of misinformation when they said it. So that's a good catch. It would be interesting to think about misinformation then versus misinformation now, because then it was more like potentially just not enough information, right? Whereas here it's a very targeted, like now misinformation is it's an attack on different groups of people to try to, limit their, it's a targeted attack to limit information from these groups of people. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a political weapon, and it's also a media weapon. I mean, it's done. You're right. It's done to literally gaslight or manipulate an audience. It's just, the whole idea of checks and balances kind of loses its meaning when we go this route, and kind of has in modern day society. Right. 4.1. This movie got on Letterboxd. 4.1. Rotten Tomatoes. Let me grab it real quick. I just want to make sure that I failed to get that one, but I got it for the other movie.
I got it here.
What was it?
96%.
96%. Now, what was the popcorn meter?
Oh, I didn't get that.
Here, I'll look it up. Normally we don't, but I'm curious just for when we compare it to later, because I want to make this comparison. 91%. So the popcorn meter for I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, 91%. Will told you it's 96% on the tomato, which is usually the critics. Will, Paul Muni, James Allen, Glenda Farrell, Marie, Helen Vincent played Helen. No other character really stood out to me outside of Edward Ellis, the gentleman that played Bomber. Anybody else stand out to you in this movie besides Paul Muni?
The brother was an interesting character. I didn't realize it was the brother at
Fair
first.
enough.
I thought it was like maybe a romantic beau or maybe an uncle. It seemed a lot older than Paul Muni in this instance. But I thought that was an interesting character that he kind of came back into the picture and gave a little bit of, clarity to James Allen rather than Alan James. Just use a different name, man. What are you doing? But that's really the only other character I can think of here. I thought maybe the mother might play a bigger role early on. She was around, but we didn't get to see her again. So.
Yeah, it's funny because I thought he was just a father, priest, reverend, whatever, who was just like excited to have a member of society back in. And I thought he was just there. And then you kind of find out later on that he's the brother, which they could do a little bit better job of giving us those details. But again, it's just so funny to me. Again, we have a fatherless situation. It's such a theme in these early day movies, especially when it comes to anybody that has a son going to war. It's almost like they because they weren't given, any education on how to be a quote unquote man from their father. And we don't even get an exposition of where dad is. Like we get nothing. They're just written off these things. So it just, it really showcases, I think it highlights where fathers were at in early day society, like non-existent. They don't even write them into these things.
No, it's really interesting that he's not even in the picture in this film. Makes you wonder, like, the army, the military is supposed to be like gives you guidance, gives you discipline, so maybe that's why he's in the army to begin with, is because he needed that. So that's where he went. We just don't get enough information here to really know, but yeah, really interesting that we don't have strong father figures hardly at all.
we might not have them for some time to come. Let's get into some scenes. Let's roll. Opening scene. The film begins with a prologue highlighting the cruel conditions of chain gangs in America, setting the tone for a story that challenges the justice system. Second scene here, James Allen, not Alan James, he returns from war. James Allen, who's played by Paul Muni, returns from World War I filled with hopes for a better future. Despite his mother's wishes, he dreams of becoming an engineer rather than returning to a desk job. Right away, we kind of learn about how he doesn't want to be, he's never going to be seen in the factory again, right? And one thing that catches my eye with this movie is just like the opening scene of them all on the ship, right? And all of these extras that they hire for this movie just for, a 5-second clip, and then they show maybe 20 to 30 guys all huddled around as they're telling stories about what they're going to do when they leave and get out of the military. So I just 100 years ago, they were still doing these grandiose things for 5 seconds of a movie. And I love that they do it. I love that we have it. I just think it's probably not necessary to pay that many extras. And maybe during this time, they're not paying extras. They're all volunteers. What do you think is happening during this time with that stuff?
Could be. I wonder how many of these extras are like almost they just work for Warner Brothers or something, right? Where they're in 30 movies a year and they have a contract with Warner Brothers to be in whenever they're needed, right? I don't know if that's the case. I just was curious, as you were talking there, that could be something that is going on. Or, there's just guys that are like, hey man, I want to be in this movie. So they just show up and there they are.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. There was probably some type of a contract for, just the year, like a 1-year stipend type thing. Just that's a great probably call on your behalf. We get to this part with the mother's wishes and he dreams of becoming an engineer. I thought Paul Muni did a really exceptional job of really showcasing the two different sides of him. The joyous side, he's clean shaven. We really get this sense that he's an optimistic, kind of lad. And and I felt that he was kind of lighter on his feet in those scenes where, we've seen him in Scarface. He's so serious and, kind of stuffy. And then we see him here in the middle of this movie where he's, now he's got the rough on his face and he's been going through it. And he really does a great job of just showing that he's stressed. Right. And I was just curious how that would kind of work as the opposite of this. And in this case, I thought he did a really good job of showcasing, kind of the youthful exuberance, so to speak.
Yeah, no, he's able to make those emotions feel real. Like in the scenes where he's like desiring something more than the factory, he's got a real genuine like desire for finding that engineer job that he's longing for. Like he wants it badly and you can feel it. And then in the scenes where he's, like you were saying, he's got the scruff on his face and he's kind of desperate. It really shows through. So he's got whatever his method is for getting ready for this stuff. I think he knows how to dial it up and make it authentic.
Yeah, he does exceptional. Scene 3, we kind of get this montage scene of him just drifting from job to job to job to disappointment. And the only reason I want to bring this up is I love that at the end of this montage scene, he goes to pawn off his medal from war. And the kind of the guy on the other side of the counter is like, he just shows him, hey, look, you're not the only one. And I thought it was really powerful that unfortunately these men come back from war and they have to, the only thing that it might not bring them pride, but like they want to sell it off as a different thing too. To see just like this bucket of all these war medals from World War I, that was a powerful scene. I thought it was kind of like what you referenced in what movie was it? All Quiet on the Western Front, and the remake about how all the name tags were on the floor. Right. So I thought that was kind of a similar idea there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, very powerful. Like the best you get for serving in this war is a medal, and it ends up in a pawn shop. Right. It really, I think it was a pretty powerful scene.
Yeah. And it really helped set the tone, I thought, for the rest of the movie to kind of just give it a little bit of layers that I think help make these movies stand out a little bit more, the details. We get to scene 4, Will, which is the diner robbery. Now, despite James befriends a man who he convinces to help, desperate, James befriends a man who convinces him to enter a diner. Unbeknownst to him, his acquaintance is planning a robbery. The police arrive, and James, though innocent, is arrested along with the thief. I thought this was really well done. Have you seen this before? I haven't seen anything like this, and maybe just nothing jumped off the page to me, but I didn't see this coming. Obviously in the next, like, as it was leading up to it, I was like, oh, something's going to happen here. But, I didn't necessarily see this coming. And when it happened, I thought it was pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed the way they kind of like needed to get us from here to the chain gang. And this was the way in which they did it. It was kind of like Martin Lawrence in the movie Life, where, he's innocent as well. But being accused of something. And I just thought it was great that we can root for this guy still, because he didn't really do anything. And yet now he's a part of this chain gang. So.
Yeah, no, brilliant scene. I don't have much to add just because you covered it, but definitely didn't see it coming. I just thought it was executed really well. From front to back, this movie does have like really good ideas and executes on them for the most part. And I think these smaller scenes really kind of show that the bigger picture is, they knew what they were doing here.
Yeah. And I think that it all matters. It all adds up. We move forward. Scene 5, he gets convicted. 10 years. 10 years? That's pretty tough for a guy that stole $5. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, yes, someone's threatened with a weapon, right? A firearm. So it's felt, I don't know about 1930s, but or I guess 20s. I don't know about felonies back then, but I'm sure that having the firearm there didn't help anything. So you'd hope for 5, but it sounds like Chain Gang likes you for the max. So
yeah, fair enough. I kind of overlooked the gun part of it. I thought maybe because of the fact that he was claiming his innocence, and he was the one that had the money on him. I thought maybe they would just go that route, but you're probably right. Introduction to the chain gang. James is shackled and thrust into the harsh life of the chain gang. Here he exposed to inhumane conditions, backbreaking labor, and abusive guards. Now this movie is only an hour and 30 minutes, Will, but I thought they did a really good job of like not going too quick in certain scenes. Like I thought drifting scene was good, that they just gave us kind of a montage. We don't need to see any more than they gave us. Yeah. But I do think it was important for us to kind of see the conditions that he's going through and kind of his, loss of innocence, so to speak, as he's experiencing, the dinner, the conditions of the chains on him, the conditions of having to work out in that heat. And just the transportation from place to place and how they bathe themselves, just the day in the life of a day one prisoner and what that looks like. I thought it was important that they spent time on it and they showed it, and they did that. So kudos to LeRoy, the director, for giving us, the ample, probably 10 minutes that we needed to get that story across.
Yeah. And I thought it was really smart too, to have the whipping scene, because we see the first person go in, and he can't, he's screaming and whimpering even by the end, and then James Allen gets in there and we don't hear a sound. I thought it was crucial, because I noted it, but then it becomes really important during the escape scene that he's able to tolerate that kind of pain. And there's a lot of smart choices here now that we're kind of talking about it. Like, man, that was a good one.
Yeah, that's great. That's actually a great connection, because I didn't piece. I caught the silence when he was whipping him. I kind of thought that's what I was going to play out, because it reminded me of Glory. You ever seen Glory with Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, Matthew Broderick? The whipping scene where Denzel's just staring at Broderick, who doesn't want to make the decision that he's made, but he's made it because he's in charge of all these men and he doesn't want anybody to get out of line. And you just get that's the most powerful scene in the movie, if not cinema history, because he just stares at him and you get that single tear. I thought it was great that they went this route, but I didn't pick up on that when you're right. The silence of when the big man is hitting him with the sledgehammer and he's trying to bend those shackles, and he's just completely silent. Even so, the great detail of how that man's, he's not going to miss when he's swinging that big sledgehammer, because they set that scene up even just 5 minutes earlier when he's hitting that nail into the ground. So it's just like they do a really good job of just piecing all this stuff together. If it feels like it was I don't want to say ahead of its time, but like it starts to feel like the craft is getting more serious and people are taking their time with these things a little more. Yeah,
and being able to consider respecting the audience, right? That's a really important part of movies for me, is the director and the creators respect the audience. If something has to be force-fed, you're probably not doing it right. So to have the subtle things add up, and you can catch those things, and it's like, hey, we're doing this thing. If you don't catch it, that's your fault. I think it works really well here.
Yep, totally agree. Just while I'm thinking of it, it's like that it's not a big issue, but I think it just showcases where a director, like I'll give you just in these two movies alone, okay? Showcases where a director is saying, here, audience, I give you the responsibility to follow along and I'm giving you credibility that you're smarter than maybe other filmmakers have given you thus far. Just something small, but like in A Farewell to Arms, they give us the dialogue of how Rinaldi is talking to Gary Cooper's character, Federico, and he's talking to him, and he says to him, hey, she's in Switzerland, right? Or Milan or something like that. And then we know he's on his way there, but then like the next scene, we get this like, twice composed of a train or something, and then like Milan or whatever comes across the screen and like smoke to like tell us, hey, we're here now. It wasn't necessary. We knew that he was on his way there. So like, again, I'm not hating on the other one for that. My point is that the director is just still not quite ready to give the audience all of that control yet. You know what I mean?
Yep. No, I see what you're saying.
Okay, the escape. We get to the escape, which is with the help of another inmate, James successfully breaks free during a chaotic scene and makes a run for freedom. A tense chase ensues, but James ultimately escapes. If you're telling me that I can escape from jail and try, and I'm not going to get any years added on, oh, dude, that's an everyday occurrence. I'm figuring that pitch out. If all I have to do is outrun the dogs at some point, I'll figure that out one of these times. No, in seriousness, yeah, you might get shot in the ass. In all seriousness, the truth is that I'm not sure that this is plausible or realistic. Can you take one of those little straws and, breathe underwater? Probably not. But I got to tell you, the thought process behind it and just the creative way of getting out of it was awesome. I thought the shooting underwater, I thought them showing, I'm not even sure how they did this at that time with the, the clarity in which they did seeing those two men underwater, the legs and whatnot. I thought it was genius. I really, really loved this first escape scene.
Yeah, no, it was very good. I thought I did catch myself like a little worried about the plausibility of the straw. But I guess I'll let that one go.
Yeah, because it's funny because I wonder how many copycats went out there and drowned because or got caught right away because they tried to emulate this. But again, it might not make sense because not a lot of movies are shown in prison, I suppose. So, all right. James builds a new life. He goes to Chicago. And he quickly, not quickly, I guess they do it over a 2 or 3 year span. He starts building his way up the ranks. He becomes, he's a laborer, then he's a foreman, then he's an assistant superintendent, and he works his way up. I thought it was, let me ask you this question, actually. Do you think they did a good enough job of kind of making him the same guy, even though he's getting these promotions? Because he could have been he could have slightly got more egotistic every time, and kind of less paranoid, which I do think he ultimately becomes less paranoid because he's having an affair. He's asking for a divorce. He's physically he's mentally he's upsetting the woman that kind of controls the power to him. So do you think they did a good enough job there, or do you think he should have became more over the top, not power hungry, but just kind of less paranoid of what was going on?
Yeah, I thought they did a pretty good job here. I think maybe the weakest part of the film is this section, not necessarily because I think they did a bad job, but just because it's hard to really. It comes down to the Marie character, right? And how she finds out through the letter. It's really hard to put into words exactly. Something felt a little off here. Did he have to admit to right away, being a fugitive? It felt like there was some pushback here where he could have tried to wiggle his way out and he didn't try very hard. That kind of bugged me a little bit. And then the other thing too, that was just kind of, I'm having a hard time putting my finger on it, but I think you're right. There's something here in this scene, in this kind of the progress up the ladder for him that feels a little off. I don't think it's necessarily him, my being concerned with his character and how he's, risen up and not changed much. I think that's plausible. But there's something in the relationship that throws it off a little bit for me.
Yeah, I bought it for the most part. You're right. This is the part of the movie though where something feels like there's a hiccup in the movie for the first time. But I do like the leverage at play because it's 1930s or late 1920s where a woman is trying to figure out how she's going to survive, where there's not many job opportunities, and where they're all maybe of the sexual nature or the less than humane, where you don't feel whatever it might be, an escort secretary, something. And in this case, she found her leverage, and she was never going to kind of let go of it. He begged for a divorce, and she said, no, you're not going to have it. She did snoop in his mail. Basically, she just controls his his life. So what I really loved about the movie, though, is like we start this movie off with Paul Mooney's character basically dying for his freedom, like wanting his freedom. He's so excited to get out of the military for his freedom. Then he gets home, and right away he feels these constraints again. And now he's got to fight for his freedom again. And then he ultimately gets into this chain gang that literally constraints him. And he has to fight for his freedom, and he gets it. And then he finds himself in a marriage with a woman that there's no love at. And now a societal chain, so to speak, and he's got to fight for his freedom. I thought the whole movie, just kept showing us different structures in society where even as a free person, you might not necessarily be free. So,
no, that's a great point. The struggle against the institutions here it's strong.
Just real quick, it's important to note that he falls in love with a lady named Helen, a kind woman who offers him genuine love and companionship. He considers a life with her and confides in her about his past. The reason that's important is because some of his character motivations down the road here. So, arrest and betrayal. So we learn that Marie learns of James' plan to divorce her, so she informs the authorities of his fugitive status. James is captured, sent back to the chain gang with promises of a pardon for good behavior. Interesting. I'm not too sure that this would happen this way without some form of writing. I'm not even sure how plausible it is that people from Georgia can come up to Chicago and remove a guy. And I think they do a good enough job of like letting us know that maybe the court systems are going to, have to make a decision on this, the public at large. But you definitely live and die with that election there, or that vote, right? You don't voluntarily go back, do you?
No, absolutely not. I think, so there's a lot of states' rights things that are kind of a little opaque for me here, right? Because I know they used to be a lot stronger, like as far as extradition goes. I don't feel like that's still the case nowadays. Like if you do something wrong in one state, you're probably going to get sent back if you get caught, right? It's not really as much a thing now as it was then. So, I mean, if you have a chance of staying out of prison, out of the chain gang, you take it. You don't go back to the place that's abusing you, because they're just going to try to find ways to exploit you some more.
Well, for the movie's sake, I think they want our protagonist to, be as morally clean as you possibly can be. And I do understand the idea of, of hoping that they're going to hold their word so nothing is looming over him. He doesn't want to be paranoid. What they do a fantastic job is from here on out, the paranoia never leaves him, and we'll get there. So, arrest and betrayal, return to the chain gang. Now he's with this unit that's even worse, apparently, because he reunites with Bomber. Bomber tells him that the chain gang before was like the Girl Scouts compared to where they are now. He learns over a period of time that they have betrayed him, they being the state. They are not going to pardon him. His brother talks him into, kind of writing it out for a year and be a good moral prisoner or standing prisoner, and they'll get him out. They'll have public perception on their side. That doesn't happen. So ultimately, it leads to a second escape and kind of a great action scene in the middle or in the late parts of this movie. That I thought was pretty believable. I thought it was really cool in the way they did it. So spirits broken. James makes a desperate second escape. The only thing in this whole thing that made no sense is why Bomber sticks his entire body outside of the car as they're going down the road just to get shot. But other than that,
there's a window right there, Bomber. Come on, man.
Yeah, I had no idea what was going on there. Other than that, I really enjoyed this little action sequence.
Yeah, it was really well done. it's got that little bit of like sped up quality to it. You can kind of tell. But other than that, kind of the bombs that were going off were real. I mean, they really blew some stuff up for this. So
Yep.
that's always a plus if you're an action fan. Maybe if you have to do a scene twice, it's not ideal. But yeah, I thought it was really well done, and Paul Mooney's desperation, on his face that whole time. Yeah, it was a good scene.
Great scene, and believable in the way they were getting away with this stuff. He blows up the bridge, like you said. It was real stuff. It leads to this final scene of the movie, and I love the last words uttered here, so much so that I always kind of do a little research on it when something like this happens. And apparently, this was one of the more powerful quotes in cinematic history. The ending is called "I Steal," is what they put here. So the film's closing scene is a haunting one. James visits Helen to say goodbye, but he can't stay. He disappears into the shadows, leaving Helen in the audience with his chilling final words. She asks him, "Do you need anything? Let me give you something. Clothes, food. Do you need money? What are you going to do?" And that leads him to say, "I steal." This powerful ending underlines the lasting trauma and desperation resulting from his experiences on the chain gang. Will, I loved you talk about tragedy in movies. We got 2 movies here as a double feature for a reason. We did not necessarily get a happy ending in either one of them. Maybe the happy ending is that he got away with it the second time, but did he really if he doesn't get to the quality of life? And the "I steal" line was just, I loved it.
Yeah. What part, when it comes to crime and punishment and how we kind of internalize that kind of stuff when the state is punishing you for things that you didn't necessarily do, or at least, are over. In this case, he did something. He was in a place and he had money in his pocket. And for him to come to this, like, the state has driven him here. So punishment didn't work in this instance. And that's the whole point. Like these bonds that were around his ankles and around his wrists, not just literally, but figuratively, the whole entire movie, you can't escape them. And I think that's kind of the moral of the story here is how can you be free when these are our institutions? And really good stuff.
Yeah, really good stuff. And I think it would be even interesting too today. They show this from someone that we clearly know is innocent, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting if we are seeing someone that we clearly know is not innocent, but commits some semblance of a crime that we believe they are able to come back from. And to watch the state and these institutions overstep and misuse their power and claim on some platform that they're doing it for the greater good of society, and yet they are pushing this person to the very side that they don't want society to be on because of that misuse of power and authority. And what I love in this movie is you not only is that taking place, right? But before we fully get there, you have an active participant from someone who knows they're innocent, still trying to play along with the system, to do right by the system, to say, hey, look, even the system is flawed. I'm willing to do this for another year in order to clear my name. He kind of has hope that they're going to do it right. He voluntarily walks back into it. And that shouldn't even be the case. He's innocent. But yet he's participating. So it's not just this way of physically controlling someone's body, but mentally taking them over and making them kind of submissive to their way of doing things, both mentally and physically. I just think it's an important thing that you studied, and I get the fascination with it. So
yeah. What's that movie with Kevin Spacey? The Life. What is that movie where he is in jail and on death row, and he is innocent, but then we find out at the very last second that he's not. And
Life of David Gale.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about this movie because it's just an instance where the state ends up killing the right guy, but they don't realize it until I think the way the movie ends is they never realize it. Long story short, there's a lot being said here in I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, and I think it works really well when there's a clear reason for the chain. Like, the chain gang exists so that there can be a chain gang to do these menial hard labor jobs for the state. They set up rules and laws in order for them to be broken so they can put people into these chains, right?
Yes.
It's a little harder now because there's not these clear instances of like the state is failing us. I mean, there are, but when it comes to like the prison system, it's so murky now. There's so many like different like state and federal and jail and prison. There's just all these different boundaries that we don't really know about that make it a lot harder to see. So seeing it made obvious here in this film, I think really works, and trying to see what it would look like now is an interesting project.
Yeah, it's an interesting project, and it's so, I guess, foreign to me. Not necessarily foreign. That might not be the right word, but like, I just find it a little crazy that these institutions really are on the side of righteousness, right? They should be anyways, right? Like, they should be real rehabilitation centers. We should all want prison systems in some form, you know, when bad actors or bad doers commit, you know, their crimes, there should be some form of retribution and punishment for that. And only when we feel that they are rehabilitated, or, you know, because who's to say what the appropriate amount of time for any of these things are, you know, when we have statistics that show that more than 50% of them go out and commit these same crimes again. So clearly what's working, or what's being done, is not working. And there is statistics that show that corporal punishment and things like that do lend to less of this happening. However, is it humane, and should these things be taking place? And it's like, where's that balance at? And so on and so on. So anyways, that's a conversation for another day, but I thought it was a great movie in the form in which I fully understood the message. I fully understood that there was injustices that was being done. And it leads to a great conversation like this. So I enjoyed this very much. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and don't forget what the great Killer Mike says. In the story of Jesus, the hero is killed by the state. So just got to be careful with that. You know? I
actually might go see Killer Mike and Dave Chappelle in a couple weeks in Detroit. Man. If I want to spend that ticket, I haven't decided yet. Interesting. Will, what did you rate this movie? Where are you at with it?
Oh, right in that 4 to 4.5 neighborhood. I'm probably going to end up with a 4.5. I think our conversation kind of fleshed out how a lot of the smaller things that I was missing, as that the sum is greater. No, the sum is greater than the parts, or whatever the saying is. All the small things really matter here, and I think the conversation helped flesh that out. So,
I think I'm right there with you. I was leaning 4. I might move up to a 4.5. I'll give it a couple days to see, but I do know that there's going to be things from this movie that I think about, and a lot of it's just going to be Paul Muni. So, nominations real quick. Anybody outside of Paul Muni that you think is eligible for one of these things?
I don't think I would nominate anybody else. I think it's pretty heavily focused on Paul Muni. You know, Bomber was fun, but I don't necessarily think he's doing a job that requires being nominated for. So
he would have been the only. Yeah, oh. Edward Ellis played Bomber. He would have been the only one I would have gave a best supporting actor to, because I'm not sure we're gonna have a lot of them. So I'm gonna nominate him, but I don't know that he's in it enough either to really make a lasting impact on the movie. So
yeah.
All right. Yep. Now for the conversation we've been waiting for. The Will and I are on opposite sides of this movie. I found this movie to be Lackluster in its approach to the things that they were trying to achieve. Will found this movie to be slightly better than the last movie that we just talked about, and we're going to dive into why that is. Just a quick reminder, this is A Farewell to Arms, came out December 8th, 1932. Gary Cooper played Frederick Henry, and Helen Hayes played Catherine Barkley. So a few anecdotes, Will. Okay. Things that I wanted to talk about. So this gets a 3.4 on Letterboxd, which the last movie, Chain Gang, got 4.1. That's a substantial difference from a majority of people that have watched it. The thing I thought was interesting, though, is that critics give this an 88%. However, the popcorn meter, which we normally don't pay issue to, but reason is because it's usually pretty close. Whether it's 88 and then like 84 for one or something like that. In this case, the popcorn meter reads at 53%. And I think the reason I bring this up is because coin flip. I feel like it's down to a coin flip. You're either going to like this movie or you're going to love this movie. You're going to hate this movie. I hated this movie. Will love this movie. And man, if that doesn't kind of showcase where Rotten Tomatoes is at. So give me your argument for just why you like this movie slightly better than the one that we just talked about.
Honestly, it just comes down to the ending for me. I think, honest opinion about how the movie kind of I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang is a technical, I don't want to say masterpiece, but technical marvel because of how everything adds up and everything is. I don't want to say it's a plateau the whole way. It's a really high plateau, I guess, is one way to say it. Everything is on a high on I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. In A Farewell to Arms, you have, the acting's not as good. The dialogue is flat in some areas. The story, I feel like that's kind of underneath it all, though. These two people who are, suddenly in love, and they are trying to navigate that at the best of their ability that the army and the war will let them, are almost back together. And then, fate rips them apart, right? There is no happy ending here. There's no, these two people who are fighting their best friends, right, in order to be together. And, they're supposed to have this baby. They're supposed to have this beautiful life together going forward. And war and society and family, all it pulls them apart so much so that they die. I mean, Catherine dies of essentially, heartbreak. She finds the letters and it leads to her demise. And it's, is it plausible for this to really happen? No, but I think this is very heavily based, I would imagine. I haven't read the book from A Farewell to Arms from Ernest Hemingway, but there is a Greek tragedy happening here, right? Tristan and Isolde is happening here. The story about these two people who love each other so dearly that one dies, the other dies. We don't get Gary Cooper's death in this movie, but there's something very powerful and very like, I'm not a romantic, where I want, to romance everybody, right? But I do have a very strong pull to the ideal, right? The reason why I'm pulled to God so strongly, the idea of God, is because I want it to be true, right? In the same way I want true love to be true. And I think here we're getting a glimpse of what true love kind of looks like. It doesn't make sense to anybody else. It doesn't even really make sense to me in this film how these two would fall in love this quickly. But yet she dies because of that love. And, we get this beautiful moment between these two before she goes. And I thought it was otherworldly.
Well, I'm really happy that this movie did those things for you, because I think when you watch this, I think the ultimate conclusion is based upon whether or not you found their love to be not necessarily believable, but maybe believable, because the truth of the matter is that I'm not somebody that doesn't think you can't fall in love with someone on the first time you meet them. Like I believe that there's something, a chemistry can be so strong. It might not be love in the traditional sense or maybe even in the definition sense, but there is something that is so strong that when you look back upon it after you've been together long enough, you're like, I feel like what we are now, we've been that since the moment we've met. And you can, in hindsight, label something as love at first sight, which, you know, that I understand. Whether or not it's not necessarily love in the beginning, because you could live the next day without them, even though you spend your time thinking about them all the time. However, I always find it challenging that when we disagree on something, finding the grounds to, you know, to make sure that I'm treating it with the respect that it deserves, because the movie does deserve the respect. But right away, when they meet each other, I like the idea of how they met each other. Like, I love that he's playing with the foot of the one that we never really see, but we hear the voice, and then we get this. I love the meet cute. It's Gary Cooper to me. I just find him to be very bad. I do. I don't believe he's so one level. I'm not convinced that he's outside of himself, in love with this person. Like, he's so Cool Hand Luke the whole time, but not even in like a charming way. He's just unbothered by everything, it feels like to me, in every scenario, that I did not buy this Romeo, Juliet, Tristan and Isolde, you know, love story. I didn't buy it because I don't buy he's in love with her. I don't buy she's in love with him. The whole love story for me just did not work. The story might work if I felt they were in love. You get what I'm saying? Now, that's just one level of, and I think that's the biggest area that I have that's a problem. But then you get to the actual story. So before we get there, because we'll do it scene by scene like we normally do, I want to give you a few other anecdotes, because I was wrong. Ernest Hemingway wrote the book, and I thought they were giving him credit as a writer of this on the movie.
Okay.
That did not happen. And as a matter of fact, not only did that not happen, Hemingway was very disappointed in the movie. Ernest Hemingway, known for his strong opinions, was not pleased with this adaptation at all. He disliked the changes Paramount made to the story to fit Hollywood standards, particularly the happy ending tacked onto some versions, even though you didn't get a happy ending. What he was referring to was how they focused more on the romance of it and less of the struggle. And so he was, from day one, upset with the kind of the adaptation that they had, which I was completely wrong about. I thought he was one of the writers, so I wanted to make sure that we clarified that. But so that was something worth noting. With that being said, I too love a tragedy because I think they hit harder. One of my favorite love stories, only because of the realistic nature behind it, is, you ever seen the movie Blue Valentine?
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling, Michelle Williams. I say it's one of my favorite love stories because it's the opposite end of a love story. It's like what happens when they don't make it. It's probably more heart-wrenching, right? Because those emotions tend to be more overwhelming. Visceral. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. They're more visceral. And so therefore, when you have a visceral ending like you do in this movie, the payoff should be there. It just wasn't for me. So I won't harp any more than that, but that's kind of where I was. I just didn't buy the love story. And you did. So
I did.
Shall we dive into it?
Sure.
Let's dive into it. Opening scene, the introduction to war and characters. The opening sequence is the film opens with a montage of war scenes illustrating the brutality and devastation of World War I. But finally, we get to meet Frederick Henry, who's played by Gary Cooper. He's an American ambulance driver in the Italian army, and he's now being introduced as Frederick. He's seen interacting with his fellow soldiers, showing his camaraderie and somewhat cavalier attitude. I want to ask this again. What is it with these Americans? Like this is Gary Cooper's now second time joining like the Foreign Legion, or in this case, being an American who just has to join in war of someone, someone else's behalf.
It's that American individualism. The hero can save the day. It's, it's still wreaking havoc on us in 2024.
And our hero in this movie is trying to get out every chance he can get. And to be honest, if you're an American fighting in an Italian war, or, on the Italian side, you should be able to get out. You should be able to leave. Hey, I don't want to do this no more. Change my mind. I'm gone. Maybe not.
Yeah.
He meets Catherine Barclay. We meet Catherine Barclay, a British nurse serving in Italy. Her melancholy hints at past losses, including her fiancé who was killed in the war. This makes her particularly vulnerable and wary of new relationships. I thought this was great because we get exposition on her, but we never really get the exposition from Gary Cooper's character. And I wanted that in Morocco, and we didn't get it, and we didn't get it here. And I think these things matter, and they would help us, maybe kind of root the meet cute even more. Like, we love the meet cute. Now root us into a love story that we can get behind. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel we get a lot of Gary Cooper's kind of apathy early on here. I mean, that whole scene of the bombing where he's kind of talking to the women's feet are him telling us how he feels about the state of this war and the state of his being in it. Whether or not we know how he got there, I guess, is kind of unknown. But I think we get a lot of who he is in these early scenes.
No, I think we get his, kind of attrition for this war and kind of where he's at. I buy all that. It just feels like, man, I know we'll never watch this movie again. But I would almost love to rewatch this one with you in person and have us like, maybe it is worth me watching again. Every time someone opened their mouth, I caught myself saying, "Oh, why?" It felt like I'm watching something that it's supposed to be important. It feels like it's supposed to be important, but nothing is matching what I'm seeing, and that is where I kind of had maybe a disconnect. With that being said, Helen Hayes, I do slightly like her. I do think that she brings something to the screen that is trying, at least from my end, is trying to pull something out of Gary Cooper's character. And I wanted to mention one of the anecdotes I didn't get to was this Gary Cooper's intensity. So Gary Cooper, who played Frederick Henry, brought an intense, subtle quality to his role, but he initially struggled with the emotional depth of the character. Director Frank Borage worked closely with him, encouraging Cooper to draw on personal experiences to give an emotionally raw performance, which became one of his most memorable of the early 30s. So I think what's happening with Gary Cooper is you are seeing sort of what Frank Borage was able to pull out of him. And I'm seeing what Frank Borage saw in him in the beginning. So I think we might just be in early days Gary Cooper, where some of his better stuff might be coming down the road.
Yeah, I almost feel like you could see this movie as a manifestation of that, right?
Sure.
Where at the beginning we have Gary Cooper. I like the early scenes. I'm not trying to bag on him too hard because I do think that some important stuff is happening there with the apathy of war. But there's the problem here for me, and I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit as we get through the scenes, but it's the writing, because the writing is it's like it's a play, right? And sometimes, like, I know you love the movie Fences, right? For me, Fences feels written for a lot of the time. And sometimes I can get over that and sometimes I can't. And there are parts of fences where I get through it, and then there's parts that I can't. And here, I think it's just kind of the reverse of that, where I'm seeing maybe some deeper philosophical like meaning in this like idealism that's being pulled out of the Wagner opera of Tristan and Isolde. And for me, that's from experience, because I've thought about Richard Wagner a lot. So when that kind of comes to fruition at the end, everything else kind of adds up to. Long story short, I think Gary Cooper is getting to a place where he's going to be a great actor. And I think we get there by the end of the movie. So maybe it pays off for me a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think what you just said is fair, because I completely feel Fences as a play. Like I'm not, I'm just enamored with Denzel's Washington's and Viola Davis's ability to make me momentarily escape the fact that it's a play,
Sure.
and that it's wordy, you know what I mean? And that it feels like these are real people. And where often it's, you know, in a movie, you don't have to have that battle where I know it's a play going into it, and you escape the fact and get to the place that they want you to get to. So I'm consciously aware of that. I think where in this case, it feels like a play maybe to me the whole time, and I didn't get the performances that I needed in order to kind of escape that reality for me. Let's move on. The first encounter just happened. Now we have the date in the garden. Frederick and Catherine go for a walk in a lush garden, deepening their bond. Their flirtations reveal both their chemistry and a growing affection. Adolphe Menjou. Now, Gary Cooper, is he really a good person? Because here's the thing, man. He's deserting. He's stolen his best friend's girl, which, you know, whatever. It happens, I guess. But like in this case, he just told in the scene before that he really likes her. He wants some money. He wants to impress her. He wants to, you know, and then the next scene, there they are in the garden. And again, I guess I just don't see any, I don't want to be the guy that harps on every scene, but in this scene, I don't see any inner turmoil of him like not wanting to take this girl from his best friend. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like Adolphe Menjou escapes from the scene, and he just walks over, sits down, and Adolphe Menjou comes back, and he tells him, hey, you should go away, basically. And it's just like, I mean, and I kind of felt, I think that's how I felt for a lot of these scenes. It's like, where's the beef? Where's the beef? Where's the thing I should be clinging on to? You know, it's like, hey, look, man, I know you like this one, but like, I've got a strong feeling I need to see about a girl. Here's the ticket slid across the counter. I need you to let me have this one. Like, I need that. I need it. And I don't know if that's a fair assessment.
You're probably right. This is not a great scene, right? This scene has some weaknesses. I don't love the Gary Cooper's like insistence upon kissing her. It felt a little gross there for a minute or two. There's some dynamics at play here between like what's acceptable for this situation. Like they both know they shouldn't be in it, and I don't think it's executed very well. But to kind of back up to Adolphe Menjou, like Rinaldi, he called dibs, right? I mean, that counts for something.
I called dibs.
That's essentially what it is. I mean, he said dibs. It's not like he'd been making progress here, clearly.
Is it How I Met Your Mother where they do that exaggeration? He had dibs. Is that how?
I think so. Yeah, I'm having a hard time remember what scene, or what episode, but.
Yeah, I think it was Barney who called dibs on someone. Ted ended up with her. I can't remember. And it's the wedding. The wedding. He had dibs. It was at the wedding. Anyways, we move on. Now they're in the thunderstorm. They share their passionate kiss. I whether it's Gary Cooper and them, maybe here, I don't think the director is helping Gary Cooper's case, because they end this scene with her saying the word no very adamantly, like 4 or 5 times, and then it goes to black, and then we wake up and, you know, she's okay with it now. You know, we learn that she basically was a virgin, I'm assuming, right?
Mm, I
Because
don't know. I guess I didn't get that
okay,
sense.
maybe not. I got the sense that he verbatim says, "Why didn't you just tell me?" And is that maybe okay? Maybe that's the part I missed. Maybe she was referring to the husband because she refers to the husband here. Okay,
I think
I
so.
took it as a virgin when in reality that was a miss. I missed that. That was her saying, "I just didn't want to have sex again because of my past fiance."
Yeah.
Okay, okay, that helps me a lot. Actually, that helps me a lot. But is it? I'm not going to even. We're not even going to harp on that scene. We'll move on. Relationship intensifies in the wounds of the war. So now Frederick is wounded during a battle scene. Frederick is injured in action and taken to a hospital. His injuries serve as a physical reminder of the war's toll. So now he's at the hospital in which Barclay's at. Now they have a no canoodling with the patients type thing, right? They have the nurses have a code of conduct that they're supposed to be following, and when they don't, like earlier in the movie, they get let go. Correct?
Right.
And in that time, that's a very prestigious, dignified, probably well-to-pay or well-to-do job that these women can have during that time.
Yeah, and I think it's clear that they have to be single, right? Because it seems to be insinuated that once they are consummated in some sort of relationship, that they can't have that job anymore. So there's some weird standards going on here that I don't quite get, but that's okay.
But see, that's the kind of the issue with me is that I feel like we need to get that because the big part of this movie that starts picking up for me that gets better is the pregnancy part, right? Is this idea that if they have a child, they can't they can't have the job anymore. But you're right, they got to be single. It's almost like a nun's nursery type thing. I wanted a little bit more explanation of that so that we were fully rooted in the rules of this environment so that when this thing happens at the end, we fully understand what's at stake.
Yeah, and I just wonder if some of that's taken for granted because of the time frame, right? Because we're watching a 100-year-old movie about a time that's even older than that. So I just wonder if there's some stuff that is taken for granted here, and I don't know if it's allowable because of you can't predict future morals, right? So if you think something's going to be a standard, you just kind of assume future audiences are going to understand what the standard is, even though for us it's not anymore. So I just think there might be some of that going on too.
Oh, that's fair. No, that's fair. Because if you could predict future morals, then I think it would be questioning the moral.
Right.
If you're saying what we're doing now could be, it doesn't matter. Secret wedding ceremony, Will. So they get married here. And I think you kind of had that ongoing character of the Catholic priest, who becomes a big part in getting them now. They're now married. I thought this was a little odd. This scene felt odd because he's kind of mumbling it, and they're trying to figure out what he's doing. But ultimately, they get to this point where they're married. My question was, were they legally married at that point, or was this like they were going to do it again down the road?
What's law in the eyes of God?
Okay.
Right?
Good call.
Yeah, I just think that they're more concerned about it's more about how they feel about each other and feeling comfortable with the relationship than it is about what it looks like to society in this scene.
Yeah.
So
Frederick recovers and is being forced now to return to duty. One of the head nurses walks in, sees all of his bottles of brandy and whiskey. I found this part to be really funny where she has the bed flipped up on one side. There's all this stuff revealed. She leaves the room. Yeah. He flips the bed down. I thought it'd been funnier if she took all of it and walked out, and then he flips that, and then there's the one. But nonetheless, I thought it was really funny. And this is where this is the Gary Cooper that I like, that works for me. The Harrison Ford style, this charming, you think you've got something on me, I actually have one up on you. That's, when he does that with the smirks and the stuff, that's when I really feel a connection to him. So we move on though. So Frederick now has to go back to war because she, the head nurse, has now told him, that this has to take place.
Yeah.
At this point, I think this movie won 2 awards for Oscars. It won cinematography and sound, and best sound. This is the greatest shot in the movie to me, maybe outside the last shot, right?
Okay.
He goes to the train station and he's getting ready to return to war. And then she kind of follows him, and we get this kind of like one take of the camera just kind of going into the building, and it goes around the bend, and then it's like in front of a glass window, and she's watching him. And then we get the camera reverses and we see it like on her face. I thought, to me, there were so many shots in this movie that for me personally kind of redeemed the movie, where I was like, at least I'm watching something technically that I haven't seen these camera movements before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, this is a brilliant scene. The way it's shot, just kind of with the music playing as well, like the way she's just, you can see the longing. Like, you're not seeing her face, but the way she's acting in the scene, you can kind of see her almost desperation to just see his face one more time. And what we come to learn is there's probably some tension there of, she didn't tell him about being pregnant, and she probably wants to in this scene. So there's a lot going on in this scene that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. To me, because I love this scene that so much, all the conversation prior, I just wanted to pick up more that there was this struggle. I guess I really wanted to feel that Gary Cooper felt like he was leaving with something not being said. You know what I mean? I wanted him to understand that there's something on the table here that maybe not completely understanding, but like feels like something's in the air to make this matter more, so that when we learn she's pregnant, you know what I mean? It hits harder. I guess there's just little areas that I think they can do it better, but nonetheless, this scene was really, really shot well for me. We learn of Catherine's pregnancy, and then we ultimately get this letters being intercepted. And this is important because this ultimately leads to the heartbreak that leads to her dying at the end of this movie. She decides that she's going to move to Switzerland. And she's going to write him, but mainly she moves because she quits her job, right? She has to quit her job because they'll fire her anyways, because she'll eventually show that she's pregnant. So she needs a safe haven and a place that she can go to, that she can have her baby, and have a place for him to come back to, so that they can live their life.
Right. And also another just smart scene where she's reading the letter that she's writing, and what she's describing is like an exaggeration of all the things that we're seeing. I just thought it was really clever way of kind of showing that she's optimistic in this scene and trying to make him write nice things to him, right? And not because
he's off the war. This is where Rinaldi is, again, he was upset earlier, jealous because he loved Catherine, or wanted to be with Catherine. Catherine did not showcase that love back to him. So he sent her away, to which they end up finding each other again. And now he is intercepting these letters and sending them back to sender, return to sender, as he stamps it on every single letter. And ultimately, it's not until letter 21 that she's going to mail that she gets to in front of the carrier and says, any mail today? And she learns that she's got a bunch of mail, to which she's very elated. And then she finds out that it is all of her previous letters coming back to her. At this same time, Frederick has kind of learned the same fate, and he is fighting his way back through a really fascinating kind of montage scene that I liked. I thought it was a smidgen too long, but I liked, because it showcased, the journey back that he had to, and what he endured to get back to her. And that will ultimately leads to him arriving at the hospital at the end here.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't, I guess I disagree with you here. It's not a big deal, but I didn't think it was too long. I mean, if this movie was 2 hours long, maybe we're talking about things that could be cut. But I think it works okay here because we're only talking about hour and a half, really. So I think it works.
Yeah, it probably does. But my thing is like I guess if you remember early on in the movie when he's an ambulance driver, he like leaves and then he's like, we got to turn it around because he's got to get right back to her. Right. It just felt like every time he got back out in the war, he had to turn it right back around. And it's like, well, if that was the case, if you were going to desert her, why didn't you just stay in the first place and do it together? And so those were my only things. But as far as the montage scene, I thought it was important because it was like in the chain gang scene where we were learning the day of, day one. I think it was important to kind of see all the things that he's enduring to get back to her. Like what love is willing, how far it's willing to propel us back to the ones that we love in order to, to get there once again.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's break down Rinaldi real quick and the character motivations of him ultimately telling. Now, he doesn't tell Frederick that he's the one that's been stamping the letters to return to sender, but he does tell her where she's at, and off he goes.
Right.
Where are you at with the dynamic of those two? Just out of, just does it feel like a friendship? Because I never feel like Gary Cooper is ever really a good friend to him. He's mad at him for talking when he's writing the letter. He steals his girl. That's important to me. But Adolphe Menjal is just so like, hey baby. He's just so, like, why didn't you just tell me you were in love with her? He's such a good guy to him that he's willing to like constantly, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I guess the friendship is a little one-sided, but at the same time, like Adolphe's, saying like he's trying to help Frederick, right, and sending these letters back, but really it's probably based in some form of jealousy, right?
Yeah,
that he
for
didn't
sure.
get her. So there's some dynamic there where he's saying it's for Frederick, but really it's probably a little bit more selfish than that. And maybe for good reason. Maybe he needs to be a little bit more selfish in this friendship.
Yeah, it
But
could be.
yeah, I don't know. They're buddies at war, and the camaraderie there is probably pretty thin because it seems it's based on pretty much
Drinking.
just drinking. Yeah, so I think Frederick here is more like friends by convenience, and
Sure.
Rinaldi, maybe it's an Italian thing too, right? He's just a little bit more passionate about the people he's around. So I don't know.
That's probably fair, and I probably have a little bit of a Adolphe Menjal from other movies that I'm bringing into this experience with me because we've liked him so much. I must just say this is probably the least likable character that he's had of the three that we've seen. So maybe I brought in some past biases with me that I probably shouldn't have. Let's get to the final scene though, the climax, the resolution. Catherine goes into labor. Okay, that's what I took it as. She goes into labor because she falls to the floor because of all these, it's early labor. She falls to the floor because of the heartbreak that's coming. She's weak at this point. And ultimately, Frederick finds his way back to the hospital. Now, through conversations with the doctors and Catherine's character, we learn that she's going to die. And it's just a matter of timing, and she doesn't want them to tell him. And it just goes to this idea that she's kind of, we've mentioned how brave she is throughout this movie, and she's protecting him the whole time. She protected him in those letters when she was writing to him, and she was lying to him for his benefit, and now she's protecting him again, which is why I wish she wouldn't have revealed and kind of had that spazzing moment, which maybe is probably more humane that she did have it. So,
yeah, and I just think like when she actually sees him and she just wants to tell him the truth.
Yeah.
She just wants to be in the moment with him and not like the moment is consumed by her dying. So there's no avoiding it. So I think that it's it's not so much that like she changes her mind here, or forgets that she wasn't going to say anything. It's more like just it naturally unfold. Like it's a natural process for to be with the one you're in love with and to tell them the truth, even if it's sometimes hard. It's hard to hide things from those you love. So
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. I thought, and I will admit that in the beginning I was like, man, I wish she wouldn't have done that. But after talking it out, you're right. It's taken over her. It's consumed her. It's plus she can feel life leaving her. You know, it's like as it's leaving her, she's consumed by saying everything she can possibly to say to this man as fast as she can because she's in love with him. So, like I said, I thought the movie got better as it went. It took too long to get there for me personally, but I do want to nominate the final scene as far as the with her in his arms as one of our best scene candidates. I also want to nominate her running in front of the glass windows as one of our best scene candidates, and I wanted to nominate Paul Muni. The reveal of him getting shaved in the barber's chair, I thought was kind of a cool shot as one of our best scene candidates. We haven't had a lot of so far in 1932. So, anything else from the, just to kind of put a bow on this movie, maybe any themes or things that we haven't talked about or just final feelings?
Yeah, I mean, I'm, I'm a pragmatist, right? At the end of the day. So like in the real world, that's kind of how I operate. Like what is the most efficient way to get your day-to-days done and just get them done. Right. But like, there's another part of me that's, strongly idealistic and can see the other side of the world where everything's good. And everything is pure. And despite that pragmatist inside me, I can't help but feel movies like this that are longing for, what's the best part of being human, right? And that in this movie, that's love, right? And that last scene we get with the light kind of getting more and more bright, and Frederick kind of really going through a loss that
Grieving,
is and it just really worked for me. And admittedly, I know it's not objectively, this movie is not perfect. I know that, but subjectively, like the way this movie ends is just it just really works for me. So
fair enough, buddy. We bring our personal experiences to the cinema, to the seat, and we can't help but take away what we view from it. I dive into the vehicle for me to enjoy things and to get that payoff is through the actors. And that's just kind of how I've always kind of been with movies. Like I'm someone that likes J. Edgar, even though I can probably tell you it's probably not a great movie, but because I'm so enamored with the performance, I kind of come back to those things. Where in this movie, maybe there's a little bit more there that is worth a second watch for me. But I was willing to acknowledge that I thought it got better as it went, but I will admit that the totality viewing experience wasn't quite there for me. But I am excited to see some more Gary Cooper in the future because I want to know what everybody's talking about. So I'm willing to wipe kind of a clean slate every time we see him. So what was your rating, Will? What'd you end up falling on this movie?
Yeah, so oh man, this one's a little tougher just because I'm trying to be as objective as possible as a bona fide film critic. But it's right in that same 4.5 for me. When a movie ends like this and it hits me that way, it's hard to see it as any lesser than that.
Fair enough. We are constantly battling what we think we should be saying versus what our fandom of something is. I'm at 2.5 or a 3. This will fall on one of the bottom 2 or 3 movies for me that we viewed. But that's what I love. This is the first time I think we've been that far apart. And I can't wait to recommend, or I can't wait to kind of reveal this movie to the public and let everybody know kind of which side of it we're on so that we can kind of see which side the public follows and trusts the most. which I'm sure is you, because when we revealed our best movies of 2023, overwhelmingly people liked your list better than mine. So
Oh no.
yeah. So that's probably where people will fall. That's it though. 1932 is now put to bed. We had 7 movies, 1 double feature, and we're coming up on the year 1933 and 1 year closer to the code haze that's about to be put into effect. So
Right. Yeah. No, it's been this one. I know in real time, people can't really follow along because we're spreading these out so far. But this year especially, we just ran into a lot of personal stuff. So I know I'm glad we made it through it, and I'm hoping that as we're getting into winter, we both have a little bit more time here to kind of iron these out and get on the right track. So.
Well said, my friend. And the rest of you guys know where to find us. Keep enjoying movies. We'll see you on down the road.
All right. See you.